Today we will discuss about the ecological adaptations of hydrophytes. So hydrophytes mean that is the plants which growing in the water or near the water bodies. So they are called as the hydrophytes. So here it is a hydrophyte. It is a Greek word that is hydr. Hydr means water and phyton means plant. Hence that is water plant. So generally the plants which growing on the wet places are near the water bodies. So examples for this is Utricularia, Vallisneria, Hydrilla, Cara, Keratophyllum, and Trappa. So these are the examples of hydrophytes. So here the factors which affecting the plants in the aquatic environment. So generally when the plants which are growing when the plants they are growing in the water, so they can be affected. The growth of these plants can be affected by the temperature of the water. So and next one is the osmotic concentration of the water. Toxicity of the water. So based on the water body. So here the temperature of the water bodies, it may be varies. And osmotic concentration of the water bodies also varies, and toxicity of the water and flow of water and dissolved oxygen in the water which is present in the water and nutrients in the water. So here this growth of the plant can be affected by temperature, osmotic concentration, toxicity, flow of water, dissolved oxygen which is present in the water, and nutrients which are present in the water. So here the hydrophytes, they are classified into three types mainly based on the relation to water and air. So here hydrophytes are classified into three types, mainly relation between the water and air. So first one is a submerged hydrophyte. So submerged hydrophytes mean they are present inside the water. So floating hydrophytes mean they can float on the surface of the water, and amphibious. So they may be it may be submerged or floating, or it may be somewhat land. They can also growing on the near the water bodies. So first one is the submerged hydrophytes. So the plants which grow below the water surface, they are called as the submerged hydrophytes. So they are not in direct contact with the air because they are present inside the water. So they are not directly contact with the water. And here they may be, again they are classified into rooted submerged hydrophytes and free floating submerged hydrophytes. So if here this submerged hydrophytes, if they contain the roots, they are called as a rooted submerged hydrophytes. They contain the roots and they are submerged. Whereas a free floating submerged, here the roots may be absent or reduced. So first rooted submerged hydrophytes. Examples for this rooted submerged hydrophytes are Vallisneria, Hydrilla, and Potamogeton. Whereas the free floating submerged hydrophytes, examples are Utricularia and Keratophyllum. So these are the free floating submerged hydrophytes. Second one is the floating hydrophytes. Here the plants, they float on the surface of the water. So here they can float on the surface of the water. So the plants contact with both air and water. And they may be or may not be rooted. Here also these floating hydrophytes, they contain the root or they may not contain the root. So again two types, free floating hydrophytes, non-rooted, and free floating but rooted hydrophytes. So examples for here the free floating hydrophytes, non-rooted hydrophytes are Wolffia microscopia. Whereas the floating but rooted hydrophytes, that is Nymphia, Nelumbium, and Victoria Riccia. So these are the examples of floating but rooted, floating rooted hydrophytes. So these are the floating hydrophytes, that is they are directly contact with both air and water. Here mainly they are present on the surface of the water. So another one is the amphibious hydrophytes. So the plants, they are adapted to both aquatic and also the terrestrial mode of life. So they are called as the amphibious. So they grow neither on shallow water or on muddy soil. So examples for this is Oryza sativa, Marsilia, and Sagittaria. So here the marsh plant, that is the shoot completely exposed to air, but roots are completely buried in the soil. So amphibious means that is here they can adapted to both aquatic and terrestrial mode of life. If the water is available, they can grow in water. So otherwise, they can also grow in the terrestrial mode. So example for this marsh plants, that is here marsh plant means the shoot is completely exposed to air, but roots are completely buried in the soil. So example cypress, and typha. So these are the marsh plants. So next one is so these are the classification of hydrophytes based on relation with water and air. That is submerged hydrophytes, floating hydrophytes, and amphibious hydrophytes. Submerged hydrophytes mean the hydrophytes that are inside the water, whereas the floating hydrophytes they are present on the surface of the water. And amphibious hydrophytes they can grow in both land and water. So here again, submerged hydrophytes, they may be rooted submerged or roots may be rootless. Roots may be absent. Here also in the floating hydrophytes also, roots may be present or absent. So next one is the adaptations of hydrophytes. So here adaptations, it may be morphological adaptation, that is external features, or anatomical adaptation, that is a modification which are taking place inside internally, internal structure, or physiological adaptation. So first one is the morphological adaptations of hydrophytes. So first, root. So generally in hydrophytes, poorly developed or reduced root system is seen. So sometimes here the root system may be absent, or it may be reduced, or it may be poorly developed. Roots are not required for the absorption. So generally the main function of the roots is attachment and absorption of water. So here because these hydrophytes generally they're growing in the water, so there is no requirement for the absorption. That is because through the surface of the plant body, so they can absorb water. So entire plant surface can absorb water and minerals. Next one is here. Generally, root caps are usually absent, and here root pockets or root sheath may be present. So the main function of this root pockets or root sheath is for the protection. So generally in hydrophytes, root caps are absent, but here the root pockets are present. These root pockets mainly helps for the protection. In Josia repens, that is two types of roots we can observe in Josia. That is normal roots and floating roots. So here normal roots, they mainly for the attachment, and floating roots, that is natively geotrophic and spongy. Here the floating roots are spongy, and floating roots mainly help keep the plant float. So for the buoyancy, these floating roots these floating roots help for the buoyancy or balance. Here two types of roots, that is floating roots are spongy. In Josia depends. So next one is the morphological adaptation. That is, next one is the stem. So here the stem very delicate. Generally, when we observe the hydrophytes, the stem is very delicate and usually green in color, and sometimes modified into rhizome or runner. So like this. So when we cut here, so again here generally in hydrophytes, that is propagation which takes vegetative propagation which takes place through this runners. Next one is the leaves. So in floating plants, the leaves long, circular, green, thin and smooth. So generally here the leaf modification we can observe in the different types. So in floating plants, that is leaves are long, circular, green, thin and smooth. And upper surface exposed to air and lower surface touch the water. So in lotus, petiole shows indefinite growth, that is long petiole, and always keep the leaf floating. Heterophily. Generally, it is also we can observe in the hydrophytes, that is heterophily present in some plants, that is morphologically different leaves. That is submerged leaves are linear or ribbon-like, are highly dissected. And floating leaves or aerial leaves are circular. So here two types of, we can observe that two types of leaves in some plants, that is small sized and larger sized and spongy leaves. So here the leaves of the free-floating hydrophytes are with smooth waxy surface. Generally on this free-floating hydrophytes, when we observe the leaves, it is smooth because of due to presence of this waxy covering. So this wax coating which protects the leaves from chemical and physical injuries, and also prevent water clogging of stomata. Here the leaves of Eichhornia with swollen and spongy petiole. When we observe the Eichhornia, here petiole is swollen and spongy. And here also long petiole we can observe in the iconia. So this provide the buoyancy. And pollination and dispersal of the fruits generally by the help of water only. And here the vegetative reproduction is the common method of reproduction. So this is about the morphological characters of adaptations of the hydrophytes. That is main characters are that is poorly developed or reduced root system, and roots are not required for the absorption generally. So the entire plant surface can absorb the water. And here root caps are absent in the hydrophytes, and here in place of root caps that is root pockets or root sheaths are present, and the main function is here the protection. So CR repeats, that is two types of roots we can observe, that is normal roots and floating roots. So generally roots, they are positively geographic. But here floating roots, they are negatively geographic and spongy. Mainly keeps the plant afloat. Next one is the stem. Here in hydrophyte, stem is also very delicate and green in color. And here modified into rhizome or runner. Next, leaves. So generally here leaves are long, circular, green, thin and smooth. So generally in floating leaves, plants, that is upper surface is covered with the waxy layer. So here the petiole also long. Generally, indefinite growth of petiole is seen in the lotus, and generally in free-floating plants, that is a petiole, long petiole, we can observe the long petiole. Heterophyly also we can observe in the hydrophytes. Generally, submerged leaves are linear or ribbon-like, or highly dissected. Submerged leaves, whereas the floating leaves or aerial leaves are generally long and circular. So next one is the anatomical adaptations in hydrophytes. So these are the morphological adaptations. So next one is the internal adaptation. So first one is the reduction in the protecting structures, increase in the aeration, reduction of supporting or mechanical tissues, and reduction in the vascular tissue. So when we observe the internal characters of these hydrophytes, that is protecting structures are reduced, increase in the aeration, that is presence of the air chambers or air enchyma. We can also observe the air enchyma, and also the here the mechanical tissues are also not well developed, that is sclerenchymatous tissue. We can also here we cannot identify that sclerenchymatous tissue, so they are also absent or reduced, and vascular tissues also reduced, because generally here the vascular tissues, the main function of the vascular tissues is conduction of water and nutrients. So through the surface of the total plant body, they can absorb the water. So here there is no special vascular tissues. So here the reduction in the vascular tissues we can observe in the hydrophytes. First one is the reduction in the protecting structure, that is cuticle totally absent in submerged parts, and in aerial parts may be present as a thin layer. Epidermis is also not the protecting layer. So epidermal cells also contain chloroplasts. So generally, when we observe the internal structure, so epidermis is single layered, and generally they do not contain the chloroplast. But in hydrophytes, here the epidermal cells also contains the chloroplast. Epidermal cells can absorb water and nutrients. So hypodermis here, epidermis is thin layered and they also contains the chloroplast. And next one is a hypodermis. Here hypodermis is poorly developed and cells are thin walled. That is, it is made up of parenchymatous cells. Next one is the increase in the aeration. That is, stomata completely absent in submerged parts, and sometimes vestigial stomata, that is, non-functional stomata may be present, and exchange of gases takes place to the cell wall. And in floating plants, stomata confined to the upper epidermis only. In the upper epidermis only contains the stomata. So air enchyma well developed in the submerged plants. So air chambers which are filled with respiratory gases and moisture. So here air enchyma and air chambers are well developed. With here in air chambers, it is they store the respiratory gases and moisture. Next one is a reduction of the supporting or mechanical tissue. So mechanical tissue is absent or poorly developed in hydrophytes, and thick-walled sclerenchymatous cells totally absent. And main function of the roots is to anchor in the soil. So in nymphia, special type. So this is also important. So generally when we take the section cutting of this petiole, so generally we can observe this star-shaped lignified cells, that is asterosclerites. So we can observe. So the main function of this asterosclerites for the mechanical support. Generally it is observed in nymphia. When we take this section cutting, so these are the air chambers and we can observe this sclerites. The main function of sclerites is to provide mechanical support or buoyancy. Next one is the reduction in the vascular tissues. So vascular elements are poorly developed, and here the absorption of water and minerals which takes place through the cell surface only, and little need of conduction tissue. So here xylem is highly reduced, and xylem which is represented by only few tracheids only, and sometimes xylem not at all developed also, and phloem usually ill developed and sometimes well developed also, and here they are arranged in the center and secondary growth is absent. So this is about the internal anatomical characters of hydrophytes. So first one is the reduction in the protecting structures. So here the epidermis is here generally thin walled, and it also contains the chloroplast, and here the cuticle may be absent. If present, it is thin walled, and hypodermis also poorly developed, and here the cells are thin walled. So generally sclerenchymatous tissue, we cannot observe this sclerenchymatous tissues in the hydrophytes. Next one is the increase in the aeration. So here the mainly presence of air chambers and aerenchyma, that is air chambers we can observe, and mainly they contain the respiratory gases. And here exchange of gases will take place through the cell wall only. Next one is the reduction of the supporting or mechanical tissue. So mechanical tissue, it is absent or poorly developed, and here thick wall, generally sclerenchymatous cells, they are totally absent, and main function of the roots is mainly here it will take a main function is here the anchor in the soil. So in nymphia, that is the special asterosclerites which are present in the nymphia. So the main function is provide mechanical support. Next one is here the vascular tissues also poorly developed if they are present. So it is represented by the tracheids. And here the secondary growth is also absent. So next one is the physiological adaptations of hydrophytes. So here the low osmotic concentration of the cell sap, and here osmotic concentration is equal or slightly higher to that of the water. Here water is absorbed by the entire plant surface, and here the nutrients are absorbed by the entire plant surface. So here the gaseous exchange also takes place through the entire plant surface. So oxygen which is produced by the photosynthesis, which is retained in the air cavities or air chambers. So this oxygen is again utilized when it required. So the main function of this aerenchyma or air chambers are they store this oxygen or gases, and they can utilize when they are required. So transpiration is absent in submerged plants, and emerged plants and floating plants have excessive transpiration. And here the mucilage cells are produced, and mucilage main functions which prevent the decay of the plants in the water. So this is about the physiological adaptations of hydrophytes. So when we observe these ecological adaptations of hydrophytes, mean when we generally presence of air chambers and reduced mechanical tissue, poorly developed vascular tissue, so we can observe this mainly. Oh, okay, sir. Okay, so today we'll stop here. In next class we will continue.
Madam, thank you very much. It's a wonderful topic and most important topic for CPGET and free online CPGET for other competitive exams. Definitely, you will observe, you will get minimum 1 or 2 questions from today's class. So, my dear friends, today's class, if you have any doubt, please ask our respected madam. Otherwise, I will wind up the session. Next class, sharp 7, we will meet. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.